Okay, I want to just transition. We'll take about 13 minutes more, I think, 12 or 13 minutes. And I want to transition to the Western context. So I sometimes make the case that freedom of expression in Quranic studies and critical Quranic studies is super important in the Western context, or outside of situations such as Egypt, which we've been discussing, because if it doesn't happen there, it's not going to happen at all. If you don't have full freedom of expression, if in organizations like the International Quranic Studies Association, then it's just not going to happen. And so there's added pressure upon intellectuals, Muslim or non-Muslim, working on the Quran in the West to embrace the historical critical method. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm sorry, hopefully this is not turning into a lecture, but it doesn't mean that there isn't a place for Islamic theological reflection in the West as well. But one should not exclude the other. So I want to speak about, is there in fact any form of limitation freedom of expression in the Western context in Quranic studies? I want to start with an anecdote, another anecdote, if you'll forgive me for this, which is that when we published first the Quran in its historical context, which was based on, I think, 2005 conference that had, a number of interesting articles in there. And we wanted to publish it in Arabic. So okay, let me give just a couple of details of the story because it's kind of entertaining. I went to a bookstore, a well-known bookstore in Beirut, and I was like, listen, I have this work of sort of critical Western scholarship on the Quran. Who will publish it? And he said, oh, I've got the perfect place for you. I'm not going to name names just so I don't ruffle any feathers. It's this publishing house run by a socialist who's anti-religious. He's an Arab nationalist socialist. He's not interested in religion. He'll publish anything. So I went there and I shared the manuscript, said, this is great. It's super interesting. I already had the translation done. So he read the translation. Super interesting, but let me just check with this one prominent Muslim intellectual just to get the okay. And this Muslim intellectual told him, listen, it's impossible that you publish this without adding a rad, a refutation, pointing out the errors of the book in the beginning. And so that was the offer. He came back to me and said, we'll publish it, but we need this prominent Muslim intellectual to write the refutation. I was like, no, thank you. And it was finally published with Dar Jamal, and I encourage everyone to find it and buy it. I think it's been pirated online, so you can probably download it for free somewhere. Okay. What do you think about this question? The context is quite different, of course, in the Western Academy, but is there something like self-censorship in Western Quranic studies?
Again, another big question about which I think, Gabriel, you have a lot to say. And thank you again for the anecdote, because I know the names, so I'm putting them in my head and I'm enjoying the story probably more than others. The subject of censorship. Let me first put it in context again. Because of everything we've just said in the first half of your show, people publishing critical research, going up for promotion at a university, and then getting whacked for doing it. Other academics become fearful, justifiably so. So do I then, publish about, critical research on the Quran or other sensitive issues within Islamic history and tradition? And, the question is, does this happen? And of course, I think we would say in many Muslim countries, I would say now less so. Again, if we can get a chance to come back to how things have changed in traditional Muslim societies, that would be great. But in the Western context, I could say a few things. It's again an area I think that the question itself is nascent as far as is there enough research? I don't think there is. So I can say anecdotally a little bit that one little story I can say is I'm part of many listservs, as I'm sure you are. Academic listservs of folks who do Islamic studies, biblical studies, Quran studies, Syriac studies, around the world. And, the main heft of that is really sort of North America and Europe, because that's where the resources are. And for the most part, I would say we enjoy a level of freedom unparalleled anywhere else in the world. I think that if I here sitting in my armchair in Houston, Texas, cannot publish comfortably about Quranic studies or late antiquity or pre-Islamic Arabia or early Islam. If I can't do it here, I can't do it anywhere. So I'm very grateful and fortunate that I have that privilege to do so, and I recognize it. That doesn't mean that there are not episodes here and there. There always are. When my book on the Quran and the Aramaic gospel traditions came out, there was some discussion, over Facebook. It was actually in German. I got to, enjoy some discussion in German about some folks who said, will there be a fatwa against this author? And there wasn't. It was just some discussion. But that's what people expect with each new publication, even if it comes from the West. But that, I think, was, again, from someone from within the traditional societies. I think it was Morocco or something like that. But within the listservs, within these listservs, especially, there's one listserv of, young Muslim academics in Europe and North America. I would express my critical views critically and respectfully. This is what I always tell my students. You can say anything in this world if you're respectful and critical at the same time. Be gentle and speak the truth. And, one example was, I would say that, a hadith about, the women in hellfire hanging by their hair. This is something that is, it's not historical. And I don't think that a prophet or any individual actually said this thing. I think it's sort of this trope that is repeated over and over again and has some roots in, rabbinic or Zoroastrian tradition. And of course, I was attacked for that. That's a very small example, but that happens all the time. So that happens, but then I get several messages privately. This is where your question comes in, saying, oh, Emran, I'm so glad you said something, because, a lot of us are just too afraid to come out of our shell and say it. There is a large wellspring, beneath the academy of academics who wants to be more critical and be more, I think, just, plain with their language about how they speak about the Quran and its appearance, its editing, its publication, its dissemination, but they don't. Maybe they can't, but I think it's mainly that they don't, because it's complicated. Part of it is, again, fear of judgment from within the community. Part of it, as you will know, Gabriel, of course, is, the problem of Islamophobia, which is real. So that does exist. Another couple of things, if you permit me. ICSA, again, the organization that we've co-founded, the International Qur'anic Studies Association. It's an organization which I think we have now, a decade under our belt of conferences, of journal articles, of books, of a community of scholars and friends that you, Gabriel, have helped build. And lessons learned. We haven't always done things right, but there are a couple of things that come to mind. I recall very well, since the very beginning, scholars from traditional Muslim institutions like Al-Azhar, from institutions from several different universities in Saudi Arabia, Morocco, Tunisia, Iran, if they could get a visa, that's another issue, right? And of course, Indonesia, a large Muslim population there, of course. So the appetite for critical intellectual approaches to the Quran is immense, but it does take bravery. And that bravery is not always there. That courage is not always there among some of our academics. But I have to be careful with what I say, because there's a lot of critical research that is published all the time. I sometimes do feel a little bit lonely, to be honest with you, as as a Muslim academic who writes about critical studies in the Quran, because there are not many conversation partners. There are people to the right of me and to the left of me, but there are very few people who are in my circle. One last thing I'm going to mention. We already mentioned his name real quickly, but Muhammad Arkoun was a brilliant man, a scholar who, again, published in French and in Arabic. He was, I think, Algerian Français, right? He was Algerian French, and that hybrid identity assisted him in his intellectual capacity, which was incredible. He has this text, "Allah mufakkar fi fil fikr al-Islami al-mu'assar," right? So the unthought in contemporary Islamic thought. The unthought. In French, he has, of course, Penser l'Islam aujourd'hui, right? So he's very concerned about Islamic thought today. Yes, any one of us can memorize a bunch of texts if we practice very, very hard and just repeat them like parrots, which at this point is hugely problematic. And I think that, we're a lot of scholars recognize, and And we're moving away from that, generally speaking. So then what is Islamic thought then? If we're moving away, what is it? So what is the unthought? The unthought for Muhammad Arkoun is, it's going very deep into your question. Where are the deep, dark crevices where people have censored themselves and are not publishing about the Quran or about the Turath, about Muhammad or Ali or Fatima? Where, we don't know because it's not published, right? So that's an article. It's a book that I would encourage everyone to take a look at. One last thing about this is, he of course uses the method of deconstructionism derived from Jacques Derrida, the French social scientist, which again is very problematic because it's the word deconstructionist. It's the D word. It's a bad word, right? He uses, of course, linguistics, which is a social science, and philology to sort of dismember tradition. But then what do you do after it? I'm of course not doing justice to it, but these are some of my ideas about censorship and self-censorship when we're talking about Quranic studies. That it does have a long history, and there's a large unspoken group of people who are hidden, unfortunately.